2019's Parasite, the movie depicts a family, the Kims, living with financial struggles and low-income jobs. Hope soon appears in the form of a family friend who introduces the son to a tutor job for the rich Park family. After he is hired, the Kims scheme to secure jobs for the other family members, starting with his sister, who is the mastermind behind this act. The sister is hired as an art teacher for a boy in the Park family. Then, they sabotage the driver, leading the dad to replace him. And finally, they manage to remove the most loyal worker in the Park family, the housekeeper. By exploiting her peach allergy, they convince the Parks that she has tuberculosis, and that's how the mom is hired as the housekeeper. Now, everyone is employed by the family, where they get to enjoy the Park's luxury. In another movie called No Other Choice, a man named Mansu, with a good-paying job and living in luxury with his wife, is suddenly laid off due to the company's systemic restructuring, forcing him to sell his house, leave his dogs, and ultimately abandon the life he had been working so hard for. He thinks the unemployment is temporary, but it lasts 13 months, as he hops incessantly from one low-paid retail job to another with no clear end in sight. However, one day, Mansu sees a position at a successful company. The job isn't vacant, however, and he plans to create the vacancy. So, to do that, he decides to remove the person currently working there and the other competitors by killing them. Both of these movies show the problems with our work system and the great lengths these people are willing to go to just to get a job. After all, a good-paying job means a better life. However, in the process, other competitors must be removed, and they are often people from the same social class. And after all, good-paying jobs are not infinite, and mouths still have to be fed. These movies show that the characters would kill for a job, but it's not necessarily because they want the job, but because they have to, they must, and it's something most of us can relate to. Despite our yearning for a job, many people find jobs boring, precarious, and meaningless. Not only that, but work invades private life, and some bosses surveil every little action their employees take, micromanaging as if they were puppets. Work places a lot of emphasis on productivity and moral duty, and it represses other meaningful activities like leisure, play, or voluntary social contribution. The fact that employment is largely privatized makes it almost impossible to escape, and it now seems like we have been unwillingly indoctrinated to accept that waged work is the primary method of income distribution. If you find your job reprehensible, it may reassure you that many people have felt this way for quite some time. Frederick Lauder, for example, wonders why people accept or even replace their own desires with those of an organization. He believes that organizations do this by capturing the worker's basal desire, the will to survive, something that is impossible to abandon. Because of this, workers' consent is seen as problematic, as they're just willing slaves. Friedrich Nietzsche also sees work as harmful to the development of reason. He rejects the whole idea of the work ethic. To him, work is a tool for social control, suppressing individuality. It's like a police force keeping everyone in line, stopping them from developing reason, ambition, or independence. All the energy we pour into work leaves nothing for reflection, dreaming, brooding, worry, love, or even hate. And lastly, one idea I highly resonate with comes from Buckminster Fuller, who argued against the notion of earning a living. He claimed that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough advanced enough to support the rest of us. So, why bother with all this nonsense of earning a living? We keep inventing jobs just to satisfy the idea that everyone has to be employed. We think the world is scarce, that survival requires competition, and that struggle is natural because of Malthusian Darwinian thinking. Because of that, we end up with inspectors inspecting inspectors. and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. It's redundant. In our contemporary era, some anarchists believe that work is inherently unhappy and should not be enforced by economic or political means, instead calling for an unconditional basic income or a shorter working week. You can also find this idea in the largest anti-work community on Reddit, which call itself idlers and promotes the idea of unemployment for all, not just for the rich. It all kind of makes sense, right? Why should our survival depend on labor and jobs, especially when the system itself is limited and often unfair? Survival shouldn't depend on luck, being born rich, or being physically stronger. Today, much less human labor is actually needed to meet our basic needs. Yet, we still tie income and survival to employment. In that sense, we are creating a kind of artificial scarcity through work, or at least maintaining a system that no longer reflects what machines are capable of producing. Machines can generate abundance, but whether that abundance benefits everyone depends on how it is distributed. Back to the movies Parasite and No Other Choice, they show how desperate people can become in a world shaped by our current job system. However, if you think that's ridiculous, wait until you hear a real-life story of something similar. In 2013, a businessman in Guangxi, China, Tan Youhui, hired a hitman to assassinate his business rival, Mr. Wei, after a legal dispute. He offered $282,000 to the man. However, instead of proceeding with the job, the hitman subcontracted it to another man for half the pay. But that man subcontracted it to another hitman, and the process repeated. In total, 5 hitmen passed the job down the chain, keeping the money and offering a smaller amount to the next person. The last hitman, however, decided not to carry out the murder and instead went to Mr. Wei to convince him to fake it. Mr. Wei agreed and planned to fake his death, but the case was reported to the police. Ultimately, the 5 hitmen and Tan Youhui were sentenced to prison for attempted murder. The world sometimes is stranger than fiction, eh? So, what's the solution to all of our problems with work? Can we delegate these tasks to people or things that have no conscious experience whatsoever, so that they won't have to experience the suffering and drudgery of work? Well, we have one answer, and that's automation. With the wave of progress that we're currently witnessing in automation and the AI industry, many of our jobs can now be done by machines. That is the foundation of a post-work society, even though it has its fair share of dangers. But we'll get to that later. In a post-work world, our work has been radically transformed, and most jobs become obsolete due to automation, or at least those that are monotonous, repetitive, and predictable. Jobs can be done more efficiently, faster, and cheaper by intelligent machines. Since machines don't require rest like humans do and can work in harsher environments for longer than we can, this is expected to lead to rapid economic growth, even though humans are mostly unemployed. However, this is only possible if wealth is redistributed fairly among humans. A post-work society would mean that we humans could have all the time to ourselves to do what we want. Maybe we can focus on our social needs, creating art, sharing stories, and building things that humanity has always been passionate about. Even commuting could free us to do what we desire, as most of it would be done in self-driving cars. A life focused on leisure instead of drudgery. If we want to dream bigger, maybe we could colonize the sky, starting with the moon, then Mars, turning what we've long dreamed of into reality. Bertrand Russell's 1935 In Praise of Idleness and other essays speculated on the possibility of a post-work world, mentioning that industrial production is sufficient with minimal labor to meet the needs of all human beings as shown in times of war. That said, a post-work world doesn't always lead to good outcomes. It simply means a world where jobs no longer exist. Not one that is automatically full of comfort, though that is also possible. One story that shows the kinds of worlds automation can create is Manna by Marshall Brain. The story starts with a narrator remembering his first minimum wage job at a fast food place. Then, a system called Manna, initially a store management AI, is introduced. To contrast with the typical automation revolution that begins in a lab or a tech giant, Manna starts at a humble Burger G restaurant in Cary, North Carolina on May 17th. A day later remembered as a turning point. That's when the first version of a management AI, Manna 1.0, goes live. Manna is also not a typical robot with a humanoid body. Instead, it's just a software running on a PC. Its job is to manage the whole restaurant using sensors, data, and headsets worn by workers. It knows everything that is happening in the restaurant. It knows when customers come in, when trash needs to be taken out, when restrooms need cleaning, and what tasks need to be done and when. Workers wear headsets connected to Manna. Instead of human managers, Manna tells each employee exactly what to do, step by step, from cooking orders to cleaning tables to restocking supplies. When the task is done, the worker says okay, and Manna gives the next instruction. It micromanages everyone constantly. The employees find Manna weird at first, but it quickly becomes routine. It keeps people extremely busy for the entire shift. Workers don't have to think for themselves because the system tells them everything. The software even plays background music and tracks every task. Because it controls everything, the restaurant runs dramatically more efficient than before. Over time, Manna gradually evolves into a powerful automation platform that dominates the service industry. The system works so well that Burger G eliminates many higher paid managerial positions, boosting productivity and profits. Soon, other chains adopt the same AI system to stay competitive. As automation spreads, unemployment skyrockets. Society becomes sharply divided, and most people cannot find meaningful jobs, leaving them forced into welfare housing. The narrator is visited by two women who invite him to live in Australia, a country with a universal basic income, and he finally leaves the US to move there. The novel contrasts two very different outcomes of the robotic revolution. The first is the dystopian outcome in the United States, where automation creates extreme inequality. Most people are unemployable and trapped in government housing projects. Social structures break down, and a wealthy few benefit from automation, while the majority have little opportunity. The second is the utopian alternative. The narrator escapes to the Australia Project, a society with a universal basic income and abundant automation. People in this society enjoy freedom, dignity, and access to the goods produced by machines, suggesting a fairer way to organize a high-tech future where automation is used for the benefits of everyone. The novel Manna raises an important question. If all aspects of our lives are almost fully automated, who controls the automation? Is it humans or is it the AI? Regardless of who controls it, whoever does holds an enormous amount of power. And this is where the concentration of power becomes a problem. Those in power might not be on our side, as seen in the US version of Manna, and especially when we look at how big corporations behave today. It's only natural to feel scared and uncertain about the future, and we have been like this for quite some time. We saw this in the 19th century with the Luddites, who opposed weaving machines by destroying them. We also see signs of resistance in recent years, such as in Chandler, Arizona, where people slashed tires and pelted rocks at self-driving cars. But our worries are not universal. A study by the Pew Research Center found that 72% of Americans are worried about increasing automation, while 80% of Swedes see automation and AI as a good thing, likely due to their country's strong unions and robust safety net. Other than losing jobs, some wonder about the dissolution of meaning. While most people hate the idea of having to work, there are people who genuinely love what they do, and taking that away might leave them feeling empty and dissatisfied. Then there's the question of time. What do we do with our time when we don't have anything we have to do? Would we become slaves to time without purpose? If some people are naturally drawn to love, friendship, philosophy, art, and science for meaning, would that be true for everyone? What if some people are more drawn to fighting, gambling, drinking, or even just boredom and depression? Well, to be honest, I don't know the answer. This is where we have to ask ourselves what we actually want from life and how we want it to go. A post-work, post-scarcity world would force people to rethink their lives completely. They would need to understand what they value, what they enjoy, and how not to be paralyzed by too much freedom. People have to keep in mind though, that while the world is not forcing you to work, it doesn't really stop you from working. And if work is the only thing keeping you from destructive behavior, then that's something people have to consider and figure out for themselves. Yuval Noah Harari though, proposes answers to the dissolution of meaning. By around 2050, he suggests technological progress might create a class of economically redundant people due to machines outperforming humans at almost every useful task, not because humans lack the capability. That means the real social challenge will be more than just economics, and it includes how people find purpose and meaning without work. Harari proposes that virtual worlds or immersive experiences could become central to life for many people. VR games and digital worlds could provide emotional engagement and a sense of purpose. Historically, religions have functioned in a similar way, creating shared virtual realities where people follow rules and pursue goals that only have meaning within that imagined framework. Consumerism, like accumulating status or possessions, is also a kind of game of meaning that humans have played for centuries. He even compares religion to a game where people gain points for certain behaviors, showing that meaning often comes from imagined structures rather than objective reality. Harari's deeper philosophical point is that in a world with no objective meaning, humans create meaning through stories, systems, and imagined realities such as religion, ideology, consumer status, games, or virtual worlds. So, a post-work world wouldn't necessarily be meaningless as long as humans can invent new frameworks to believe in and engage with. Work in its most absolute form should not vanish, but those meaningless, precarious, low-paid jobs should. While work has been an almost inseparable part of human identity, it comes with many problems, especially in a system that depends on jobs for survival. Work should become voluntary, not forced, and people should have the freedom to choose what they want to do with their lives, especially when we have the opportunity and the means to do so. Should the time come when the world is freed from existential labor, I hope it brings about good outcomes and finally allows us to live a life with more meaning and value, where we are able to do things our ancestors have long dreamed of, reach our full potential, and reduce unnecessary suffering. Hey guys, thank you for watching. It's pretty funny that I was writing some of this while I was at work. I did my tasks as needed, don't worry. I just wrote them when I had lots of free time. My job is driving me crazy honestly, but I have to do what I need to do to keep on living. Anyway, if you like what I do here, please consider supporting me on Patreon, where you get early access to videos and some exclusive content. It would really help me out. Have a good week and thanks.